Welcome to Rucks, Malls and Oval Balls. We are at episode 15 of the fans' favourite podcast. We're here talking about all things rugby and we're going to get into it. But before we get into it, I'm Dave. I am one of the glorious co-hosts of Rucks, Malls, Oval Balls, and I'm joined, as ever, by...
Yeah, it's Rory. How are you?
I got a bit worried there that you might have forgotten what your name was. Yes, Rory's here. But, as always, we start off with a little jingle. Might get a little less of it this time. We're going to spoil you. You're going to get a little bit, though. Enjoy the song. Oh, it's still so much fun to listen to that song. Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm ready. I'm pumping. Now, as always, we go into mundane banter straight away, but it's so hard to be mundane after listening to that song. And I've just got in from the rugby, Rory, so it's really difficult to bring myself down. I'm coming fresh from the pitch of man versus fat rugby. So I'm buzzing the paddock. 2 tries, again, another brace, another victory for Team Black, 7-2 over the mighty Reds.
Some form your lads are in.
Oh, we are on fire. But I must also bring some dour news to mundane banter.
Oh, no.
As we know, I've been battling my gallstones for quite some time now. It's confirmed that I will go under the knife. The gallbladder's coming out. And the real sad bit of news is, for 2 weeks prior to that surgery, I have to drop down to an 800-calorie diet for 2 weeks.
Wow. Well, I don't count my calories so much, but I assume that's what I eat between first and second breakfast.
If that, I'm dreading it. I don't know how I'm going to survive. I don't know how I'm going to function for 2 weeks.
What would constitute 800 calories? 3 blueberries?
3 blueberries, a stick of celery, some tofu. Yeah, I'm just looking at the list in front of me. It is depressing. It's like reading the obituaries, if anything.
How many post-match teas can you have on an 800-calorie diet?
Rory, I don't think I can have any post-match teas on an 800-calorie diet.
How you survive?
I don't know. So, Rory, I'm relying on you to bring me a bit more of an upbeat mundane banter to the mundane banter section, because obviously that has me down in the dumps. Have you got anything to bring me up?
Well, I suppose I've got a little bit of news. I am enrolling in a physical challenge.
No way.
In mid-May, over a course of a weekend, I will be walking 100 kilometres across the Dorset Jurassic Coast with some of the finest sled dogs that Plymouth University Rugby ever produced to drag my carcass along in order to raise money for the family charity.
Wow.
So watch this space for the Just Giving link, but 100 kilometres in 2 days for me. So I am getting my steps in, getting those miles in the old pins, David.
Wow, that sounds... Well, it makes complaining about an 800-calorie diet a bit less depressing because, puts things into perspective. It's all about perspective. Well, we will keep a close eye on your endeavours, Rory, for a worthy cause.
Absolutely.
And
I will keep everyone abreast of quite how sore my knees are.
Fantastic. And yes, we will get the Just Giving link out there. Also on a slightly dour note that I don't want to dwell on too long. Because of my gallstone surgery news, I'm probably having to postpone my 10k. I will get a new date in the diary. It isn't going away, it's just being postponed, not cancelled. So watch this space for that.
Perhaps by then we can get an R-Mob team out to...
imagine, a team.
A team. We could be a team.
10k passing a rope between us the entire way.
Wow, that would be...
Actually, let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Let's not create extra hurdles on already difficult things.
No, and yeah, we know our handling. We're adding an extra few kilometres picking the ball up every time we drop it. So, moving on from mundane banter, which was particularly not mundane this week. Excellent work, Rory. We're going in to talk about European rugby. We're going to talk about Women's Six Nations. We're going to talk DPRFR, and we're going to do some Q&A. But we're going to start off by going through European rugby. We're going to go through match by match. It was the 4 quarterfinals, and there's talking points from each one to draw out on for various different reasons. And that's where we're going to jump straight in right now, Rory. Let's go straight in. Leinster versus Glasgow, the first fixture of the quarterfinals of the European Champions Cup. Let me know your thoughts.
Well, I suppose I've got to pose a question to you. Last week, I could be argued, possibly, that I was overly harsh on Harlequins for their performance against Leinster.
Ditto.
We may have been a little bit unkind. Were we too unkind, or are Leinster just that good?
Well, I saw an interesting stat in the week saying, through the course of history of Champions Cup knockout games, I think it was, there's been like 271. There's only been 2 times that an opposing team's been nilled in that entire time. That was last weekend and this weekend, both by Leinster in this round of the tournament. So I think what we're seeing is a Leinster machine that, as we suspected from the start of the season, is so focused on this tournament that they are ripping to shreds anyone put in front of them. And I say that really, really, really wary of who the semi-final opponents are. But we won't get into that just yet.
Yeah, let's not jump forward too much. I mean, so I obviously watched this on Friday night, and I was really looking forward to this one because I thought it's first and second in the URC. Glasgow is a team I really like. I like the way they play. I
suspected potential banana skin.
I thought banana skin could potentially be there. I thought this wasn't a foregone conclusion.
No.
And I think that you could argue, and I am actually going to argue this. I think Glasgow played much better against Leinster this time out than Quins did last week. I thought Glasgow were much more competitive and battled constantly throughout the game. They actually never gave up. And you could see that Glasgow were a little bit down on some of their more quality players. Jack Dempsey, Henko Veng wasn't there.
Well, yeah, he was banned for his naughtiness. Yeah, Xander Fageson wasn't playing.
Wasn't there,
no Tuipulotu, no Hugh Jones.
So you could tell that this wasn't Glasgow at full chat. That being said, it was still a good Glasgow side, plenty of good players in there. And honestly, watching Leinster, they're just utterly relentless in everything they do. Their defence is relentless. They just pressure you constantly. They just never give up there. Their breakdown work, they never give you a moment's peace. Every single breakdown is either hands-on or they're making a mess of it or they're counter-rucking dead rucks just to make you work that much harder. It's very obvious that Jacques Nienaber is the coach. It's a very Springbok approach to the game of just relentless energy, never letting you up. If you watch, one of the reasons I love the Springboks is they just do not give you a moment's peace, and this Leinster side has exactly the same qualities to it. But then you pair that with the ability they have in attack. There's a lot of good players there, but the hands on RJ Snyman and Geordie Barrett in this game in particular. Snyman is, I'm not the first one to observe it, but the man's got telescopic arms.
Yeah, he's got telescopic arms, and he looks like he's throwing around an apple rather than a rugby ball. The way he holds that in one hand, and
honestly, I've got big hands, right? I can hold a ball in one hand relatively comfortable. I can't do anything like what he's doing with it. He looks like he's playing cricket.
Yeah.
It's mental. So, 25 minutes in, they were 19-0 up, and Glasgow were battling away on it. They had 4 tries within half an hour. They were just absolutely unplayable. I don't know actually how you compete with this team. I don't know what you can do to compete with Leinster. I'm hoping we will see someone be able to compete with them before the end of this tournament, because at the moment, it just looks like a procession.
Do you think they're unbeatable? Can you see any chinks in the armour?
Not really, not an obvious one. Your hope is if you can muscle them up front, which is not an easy task because it's not an underpowered pack by any stretch. So you'd have to overpower them up front, for which you would need an unbelievable pack, and there is only really one team in the competition that I think has a pack that can do that. Fortunately, they are still in it in Toulouse. But even if you manage that, you've still got to contend with a backline oozing quality.
Yeah, from every orifice going.
I think Prendergast can be gotten to. I think he will struggle if a pack's not going forward.
Yeah.
Not through any
We saw it with Ireland.
We saw it with Ireland. It's not through any lack of quality player. It's fly halves always struggle with a pack that's not going forward, and he's 21.
Yeah,
he's
still got a lot to learn.
Yeah, that's no slight on him there. But you've got Gibson Park, who has that just horrible uncanny ability to wriggle out of any blind corridors you try and trap him in. You got Geordie Barrett, who's got the option of a siege gun boot. He's big and strong enough to muscle it up if he has to, but he's also quick enough and good enough with the ball that he can make something happen out of nothing. So he's more than a triple threat. So there's no real obvious way to nullify him in defence, because there's always a way to you basically just have to castle him at the earliest opportunity every single time. And the best way in the world, it's difficult to get that right every single time. And then you still got Ringrose. Jamie Osborne outside him looks really good.
Yeah.
Jordan Lowe looked great. And then Hugo Keenan is an absolute class act at fullback. And that's without you start looking at the bench.
Yeah. I didn't spot a chink in that armour there either.
No.
So there's a lot of talk around Leinster about kind of how they're backed by the union, how they're kind of almost protected in many ways. There's two questions here. One, do you think they get enough credit? Two, are they getting protected by the EPCR? Two very different questions.
Very different questions, very different directions. So I'll deal with the second one first, if you don't mind. So I don't know if the EPCR are fixing it in favour of Leinster, but the rules as they stand massively favour them, as we discussed last week.
Yeah.
And they effectively always get a home cup tie when they're in the knockouts, because they're invariably the top seeds. Fair enough. And all the grounds big enough to host those games are basically their home grounds anyway.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily a case of it's deliberately fixed in their favour, but the conditions certainly work in their favour. And I don't think it's controversial to say that the IRFU
They're okay with that. Yeah. Well, and they certainly one little stat, like semi-final, you'd think it would be a 50-50 split in a semi-final, wouldn't you, for a competition like this? I think last time Leinster and Northampton met at the Aviva, I believe the separation of fans was 92% Leinster fans, 8% Northampton fans. So that feels like a fair, equitable split of a stadium's tickets.
I suppose what you would say is rugby doesn't have a great tradition of travelling fans for most teams, so it's what it is on that one.
No, but surely on the face of it, people can see that's a bit of an advantage to one team over another.
Oh yeah, it's certainly an advantage. I'm not denying that by any stretch. It very much works in their favour. But to your other point, I think they do get enough credit. I think everyone knows how brilliant they are, but everyone...
It always comes with a but, though, doesn't it? Always comes with a but.
The but is, it's so in their favour that it feels difficult to root for them if you're a neutral. They have got conditions very much in their favour. They do get the absolute pick of the litter when it comes to Irish players. They get the absolute pick of the non-Irish qualified players, as noted by the fact they had Rabasamani, Archie Sneeman and Geordie Barrett all to play on Saturday. So I suspect if it was Munster or Connaught or Ulster playing at this level this season, I'd probably be a little bit more charitable, a bit more pro them, because it's a bit more of an underdog story. But with Leinster, it's a bit like, well, yes, well done you. You are brilliant. You're great to watch, and you absolutely destroy teams. But also, you probably should, because it's kind of all in your favour at this moment in time.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe it's kind of that need for me to back an underdog, I suppose, because
I get it. I get it. It is a real struggle to kind of get behind Leinster as a story, because it feels like actually if they don't win, they're underachieving, which is a really odd thing to say for a club side, that if you don't win everything, it's a failure. But let's not dwell on Leinster too much. Glasgow were also there, although some may think otherwise. Are there any individuals or anything kind of you want to pick out from Glasgow? As you said, you feel that they were better than Harlequins. Were there any glimmers of hope for you? They were trying their hardest. They gave it their all. They still got 0 on the scoreboard. But what if you were talking to a Glasgow fan now to kind of not be so downbeat about it? What would you say to them?
So I would say, first and foremost, the fact that they were missing 4 or 5 starting players, maybe 4 or 5 of their best starting players.
Yeah.
You have to take this result with a pinch of salt anyway, because you're already up against it. So if you chuck Tuapolotto, Hugh Jones, Xander Ferguson back into that team, and Jack Dempsey maybe, and suddenly you're thinking, actually, that's a slightly different prospect for any team they're coming up against. But I thought the back three really gave it everything. They really put it about when they could. Carlstein,
Caro,
and Jamie Dobie, who I think is a 9 actually by trade, but was playing wing.
Yeah,
actually did really, really well for the most part. Rory Darge, I think his form tailed off a little bit in the Six Nations and probably wasn't quite as effective towards the end.
Ironically, peaked against Ireland, I'd say, in the Six Nations.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. But he was real shining light and he absolutely didn't give up at any point. Outside of that, I liked the look of the 9 who came on, Afshar. When he came on, he moves the ball really quickly. He's nippy around the fringes. I think there's definitely something there as well to work with. But it's just one of those where you just got to take it on the chin and just go.
Take it on the chin and focus on the URC.
Which, they're the defending champions. And they're with a good shot against the final again this year. So
I think so.
There's still plenty on the cards for them.
And obviously, Leinster, their most likely opposition in the finals, they're going all guns blazing for the other competition again. And they've come unstuck with that approach in the past. So maybe Glasgow could still come out on top in the URC. But, as we said, Leinster come out on top. Very, very comfortable victors. Nilling a second opponent in a row, which is quite insane in knockout rugby. Again, perhaps referring back to a point we made last week about this competition becoming a bit less appealing. But, we've covered that already. Let's move on to Bordeaux versus Munster.
Strange game, this one.
Yeah.
Bordeaux, for the most part, were a cut above Munster. And at various points you thought, well, they could score tries at will at any moment in this. But I've got this thing, I don't know, I think Bordeaux have a mentality problem or a ruthlessness issue.
I think they switch off.
They just take their foot.
Yeah,
they take their foot off the gas way too easy. And there was a point, I would say 60 minutes in, 65 minutes in, you started thinking, if Bordeaux aren't careful, Munster are getting back into this. They very nearly did.
Yeah, you kind of flash back to when Harlequins went to Bordeaux's backyard and stuck it up and there.
And that was a great win for Quins, but it wasn't the best Quins side I've ever seen against a not too dissimilar Bordeaux side to this one. And I think there's something to address there for them because Bordeaux are sort of they're the butt of the joke in France because they've always been one of the biggest teams. They haven't won anything for 35 years or something.
Yeah.
And they're right up there with Toulouse in terms of budget and fan base in France.
Yeah, it's huge out there. It's huge.
Yeah, massive. And they never win. Yeah. So
from the outside looking in, for me, it feels like a little bit like an over-reliance on the weapons they have in the back three. And if they don't click, there's almost like a panic. Obviously, most of the time it works absolutely fine because the back three run in tries for fun, or they make space for others. But I kind of feel that if any of them happen to have an off day, that tends to be the games where Bordeaux switch off more so than others.
Well, what I would probably say is that the Bordeaux pack is sizable and there's lots of very good players in it, but they probably don't have quite the top end quality of, say, Toulouse.
No,
pack.
Well, not many do.
So they're probably more reliant on their backs than
their Stardust backs and their Stardust forwards.
Yeah, which let's just take this back line, right? Luku, Jalibert, Bierberet, Van Rensburg, Mofana, Penaud, and Echegaray, who I hadn't really seen much of, and he was phenomenal throughout the whole game. He looks like another player to
another one to watch.
Just another one. He looked great. So as a backline, that's a backline that would stand up against virtually any international backline that comes to mind, including the starting French one, actually, to be honest. No real issue with them, utilising that as much as possible. But yeah, I think you're right. If you can nullify the back or cut off their service, which means you have to kick phenomenally well as on top of everything else, you probably can get on top of that pack. And at times Munster did do that. Their scrum, certainly early on, dominated Bordeaux's. And when they got into the game in the second half and started motoring between the centres and the pack, they were really able to go out through the guts quite easily and make ground quite easily. But part of me wonders whether it's explicitly the quality of the pack or just actually the mindset of them, because Actually, when they want to, they can pretty much stop anyone dead as well. But they just seem to switch off. I've got a question for you about this, though, David. Watching this game, I had a thought. The best player on the pitch was Maxime Lucu.
Mm-hmm.
Is there an argument that he's the second best 9 in the world, not just in France?
Oh, so obviously people are going to throw lots of names out there. You know, there's a few in the Southern Hemisphere that might have a thing or two to say about that. I can think of an Irish chap that might have something to say about that.
Yeah.
But Maxime Lucu, if Dupont didn't exist, I think he may well be considered as one of the best 9s in the world. So I don't think it's a strange thing to say. Because if he was in
just watched, he was phenomenal.
He is every part as clever and every part as creative, and he has the same sort of rugby IQ as Dupont does. The only thing he doesn't have that Dupont has, I think, is that physicality in his game. That Dupont can sometimes, if he wants to, turn it on like a back rower.
Yeah. But what I would say is that at one point, Maxime Lucu put in one of the best cover tackles.
Well, yes.
In defence.
So good cover defence, absolutely. Yeah. He like, I'm not saying he's bad at defence. I'm just saying, like, the only thing I can think of that differs between him and Dupont is that sometimes Dupont's a 7.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a fair point. But then I look at every other bit of his game. He's got a siege gun of a boot.
Yeah.
He's got great skills. He's very quick at moving it off the base. He's quick. He's got a really good eye for space. And then I just think,
would other nations take him as their starting 9?
Oh, you'd kill for him.
I think most would.
Yeah, I just think it's phenomenal. But fair play to Munster on this one. They
stuck
absolutely gave it everything.
They stuck in there.
If they didn't have one of the worst days with the line out I've ever seen from a top level team, I mean, they were appalling, weren't they?
Yeah.
They couldn't catch a cold. It was ridiculous.
It's like watching me tonight.
I'm sure you were much more impressive than that, David.
Oh, you've given me far too much credit.
Well, I do like to. But the line-out was a mess. But they were when they got their hands on the ball in the second half and they started going right up the guts. They were right in this game.
Yeah.
But you just got to contend with Bordeaux's ability to just score worldy tries. Pete Samu scored one that I was on 25 minutes. The hands leading up to it were ridiculous.
I suppose that is one of the drawbacks, because I do think Bordeaux can be got at in that style of going up the gut, very direct. But quite often when you do that, you draw your own attackers, you draw your own players into the centre of the pitch. You're focused on where that's happening. If you concede a turnover to that Bordeaux team, they will make you suffer. They will make you suffer and make you suffer quickly. As we said last week, Penaud moves like some sort of android with kind of anti-resistance to gravity and kind of no magnetic field. We've covered this already. So, yeah,
they get to the width so quickly.
Yeah, I think that's the secret to kind of how dangerous they are, because I reckon if there was some sort of measure of how quickly teams get from the ball from one wing to the other, they would probably be the quickest.
Yeah, quickest I can think of.
Yeah, absolutely. So, on Munster's perspective, then, is there anything that they could be happy with? Any individuals that you think may have stood out? Do you think they actually played well here, and it was just a case that they were playing a really good Bordeaux, or were Munster average and Bordeaux just had an off day?
Well, I think Munster can be pretty disappointed with their work in the set piece to an extent. I mean, they got the upper hand in the scrum early on, but they didn't really capitalise on that. The line-out was so poor, I keep going back to it, but it was so poor it ruined their attack constantly, and it gave Bordeaux such easy possession.
Yeah.
To be honest, that was their biggest issue. If they hadn't been so inaccurate there, I think they'd have been much closer to the winning this game. You know, I think Peter Omani didn't have his best game, but Ollie Jaeger, the tight head's really, really good. Coombs, the number 8, looked good.
Yeah, he's always impressed.
In the back line, Nankervel, Farrell, the centres.
Very, very solid. Big fan of Nankervel. I think the way he plays rugby's big fan of it.
Yeah.
When he's not banned. I know he's had a few bans this season, but
yeah, they're tough boys. And the wings actually, Calvin Nash, he made good grounds when he got the chance, but Andrew Smith scored a couple of really nice tries as well. The fullbacks, nippy. He's a bit like he's a bit in the mould of someone like a Colby, or
is that
a small, quite nippy.
Fakir Abrahams.
That's him.
Yeah, so he was with Lyon last year, and he did absolute wonders for me in my Champions Cup Fantasy League, because he used to make meters for fun. He scores tries for. I don't think it's quite clicked at Munster the same level it was at Lyon last year, but he always looks very, very exciting and elusive, which I love to see, especially when it kind of is a juxtaposition with like the centres Munster have, where it's very kind of up the gut, bloody nosed, straightforward, direct, and then you've got someone who's elusive. I think it works quite well.
Yeah, I think their backline is the strength of, unusually for a Munster team. Yeah. Their backline is better than their pack.
Yeah,
and actually, if they'd had a stronger pack at the weekend, or at least a more accurate one, they'd have been right in this game.
Maybe. Also, I don't want to potentially steal the sandwiches from your DPRFR section, but did you see the clip of Ben Tamifuma having a little interaction with the Munster fans?
Well, you have slightly jumped us ahead on this one.
In which case, hold your horses. We will cover that later on. But I had a feeling you might have spotted that little bit of social media content. That good fun,
right up my street.
Good fun, right up your street. But yeah, so Bordeaux coming away, probably worthy victors here, just because they've got that extra bit of something special over Munster, who gave it as good a shot as they can. Always going to be the bridesmaids, never the brides. They're not Leinster, are they? They don't get the rub of the green, and the green being the money within the Irish Rugby Football Union's coffers. Yeah,
I like that you said cofter instead of coffers there. That's a real Freudian slip.
It's just, food's on the brain.
Just thinking kebabs.
Slight detraction, but drove past what used to be my favourite kebab van on the way back for the rugby, and I've been thinking about it and salivating ever since. Good old Yilmaz was a good guy. But yeah, so Bordeaux probably just had a bit too much for Munster. Sets up an interesting semi-final, which we won't dig into just yet. We'll summarise the semi-finals once we've gone through the summary. Moving on to an area I'm quite happy to talk about. Northampton Saints versus Castres. I have my thoughts and feelings, but I'm always keen to get your thoughts and feelings first on these matters. Rory, how are your thoughts on that fantastic, amazing, brilliant game of rugby that was a real joy for everyone who's watching it?
Well, thank you for your entirely neutral and not overly leading question there, David. I have to say, fair play, I was really impressed by Saints in this one.
Yep.
Castres, a strong outfit. They came full bore. They got some really, really good players in their team. And Castres is a team I like. I've been to watch rugby in Castres a couple of times. I really like watching rugby there. Great little club. Real heart of the community style club. It's a great place to go and watch if you ever get the chance. Saints, though, were a class outfit on this occasion.
I wasn't expecting them to put that many points on them. I'll tell you that for...
No, I wasn't. I thought it'd be a lot closer than this. I thought, well, it was a real shame to see Hendy go off so early. Obviously, that was always going to be a downer for us. But nice to see George Furbank back on the pitch, and he had a really good game. Didn't look like he'd lost too much of a step, which is good to see.
Yeah.
Some good players to talk about. I mean, Alex Coles, I thought, had a really good game. I was really impressed by him. Kemeny, he did butcher one try opportunity, but generally he was very good. Odendale is, a real rock in the centres. Tommy Freeman, once again, brilliant. Scored, No, he scored. Sorry, I was thinking it was the sort of 1, 2, 3 with Furbank, wasn't it? It was a very good try. Yeah. But let's be realistic. Once again, we are left talking about one man.
Phil Dowson?
Try again.
Oh, Elliot Miller-Mills.
It's a young Tyro in the back row.
Oh.
He's got floppy blonde hair, and he's got an attitude to match.
Oh, Henry Pollock.
The showboater himself.
Oh, I loved it so much.
I love it. It's so good. It's so good. The social medias. You should never do. I did that. The thing you should never do on social media. I read the comments.
Don't do that. Never read the comments.
It's so funny though. It's so funny. My favourite comment so far was someone saying, "I don't like all this showboating. I'm all for everyone. I'm all for individualism, but you got to do it the right way." It's just like very Monty Python. It's like, yes, we are all individuals.
Yeah. Oh my God. I don't get it. Like the sport is screaming out for personality. The sport is screaming out for someone to be a little bit different, perhaps not so clean cut and above board and, public schoolboy image. Even though we know he is public schoolboy, just having
to see someone moonwalk in a try for a while.
Oh, I had so much fun watching that. Just the pure arrogance, and I say that in the nicest possible way, to just strut around behind the line before knocking the ball down, then dodge just the cast defenders falling at his feet. It's just there's something so beautiful. And as we said before, he is going to be a player that so many fans are going to hate with a passion. You can see it
already.
It's happening already. I don't think there's a bigger compliment out there for a player to have that impact on a fan base so quickly. Because this time last year, I don't think he played a minute of senior men's rugby.
No, and he looks, we said it before, he's to the manner born, isn't he? The only player who I thought was as good as him on Saturday in the end was Mitchell, who he's got to buy a beer because Mitchell put him in twice.
Yeah.
I mean, you could even argue for part of that game, he was actually having a quiet match.
Yeah.
Until he scored 2 tries.
It seemed that moment where Castres decided to go 3v1 on him on the ground that he thought, okay, let me just turn things up a notch and show you what I can do. It was.
How many were carded in that scuffle? 3 players?
There was 3 players carded. Remy Baget for just stupidly just shoulder charging into his side. They're the 2 players who had a nice little push and shove, a bit of handbags in the aftermath. I have my opinions on the refereeing of this game. It was a bit...
Maybe not the most...
So I want to refer back to your point earlier where Kemeny butchered a try. Are you referring to the moment he was headbutted, diving over the line? Was that the...
Yeah, he didn't score it though, did he?
He would have if he wasn't headbutted.
Because you are clutching at straws, David. If you can't score a try while someone headbutts you in the side of the head, then you don't deserve to be on the pitch.
Well, there's a reason I'm not on the pitch.
No, you're absolutely right.
But again, stealing sandwiches, I've seen a question we got in Q&A, and I want to touch on that later on, but I do think some of the refereeing in the game was a bit questionable. But I'm not going to complain too much because Saints did come out on top quite considerably. They were a class outfit, and I say that as unbiased as I possibly can be.
I need to ask you, David, because you'll have opinions on this as a Saints man. So, being realistic, any opportunity of getting any higher up in the Premiership is virtually gone, right? I don't think your 8th is probably where you're going to end up at this moment, isn't it?
Unless there's a series of surprise results for the likes of Harlequins or, I suppose, Quins. I don't see Saracens dropping any lower, even though they're still technically bottom half of the table. It's looking like 8th is our position. As much as I'd like us to, have ambitions higher than 8th, I don't necessarily see it happening.
So, with that being said, is it now a case of let's do a Leinster, let's take the first team out of the firing line, just train them for the next few weeks until that semi-final and try and get everyone firing, fit, fresh for that game? So what I'm saying is, should you throw in the towel with the Premiership and just go, we're all out on the Champions Cup now?
So I've always been of the belief that playing rugby is a much better benefit than resting your players. I've seen too many times where Saints have made the decision to rest players for a week for a game and then they've come in half-cocked and not firing.
Okay, but you know what I'm going to say in opposition to that?
Yeah.
How are Leinster doing it?
Well, yeah, there's a very strong argument that maybe the way Leinster do it is the right way because it tends to lead to positive results. So Northampton do have Newcastle next up, so I think there is an opportunity to rest some players. I suppose one thing I'll point out is quite a lot of our best players have had long periods of time out injured this season, so they don't have that many minutes in their legs. So there isn't a desperate need to rest them. Maybe Finn Smith, but we've covered our lack of depth in the 10 shirt already. Maybe give Tommy Freeman a week off, just, I definitely write off any chances of doing in the Champions Cup if he's kind of injured in any way, shape or form. So maybe wrap him in cotton wool. I don't want to stop Henry Pollock because I think caging him is probably the worst thing to do at the moment. But maybe manage his minutes because he's having an impact for sure. I think maybe it's a case of rotating the squad rather than fully wrapping them all in cotton, purely because I don't think Saints have enough players to rest them all anyway.
Wow. Yeah, I understand your point. I think you got, what is it? Is it 2 or 3 Premiership games before the semi-finals?
So the semi-finals are 5th of May, so we have two games. So we've got Newcastle up next, and then it's Bristol at home the following week. So yeah, it's a tricky one, because then after that, Well, they're not getting top four, so you do question what is it. But I don't want them to just rest the players, because I think that will just not work for Northampton. It's never worked in the past, resting players, from every time I've watched them. As much as I'd love to wrap them all in cotton wool, I think we just manage the minutes and keep them fresh, keep them still actively playing, but make sure that there's still lots of gas in the tank when we do get to that semi-final, because I am worried about how that semi-final will go if we don't go into that with the right preparation.
Yeah, I mean, I've got one thing I did take from this game, and to be fair, it's a good cast pack. It's a big cast pack. It's a big cast scrum. But I did look at this and I think I worry that Saints are going to be underpowered versus Leinster.
Oh, it's one of the reasons why we're 8th for the Premiership. The pack isn't packed full of brute force. It isn't got any big enforcers in it, really. It's a dynamic pack designed to get around the park. You get caught up in a set-piece game, we very rarely get the upper hand. It happens occasionally, but will it happen against Leinster? I don't think so. The only thing on our side is that we have a track record of running Leinster close.
Oh, look, it's a semi-final, right?
Yeah.
And let's be honest, as long as the coaching team get the emotional and psychological preparation right, which I would back them to, because I think that's something that's well within their wheelhouse as a coaching team. I feel like that's one of the strengths of that team. If you get the players in the right headspace, it's a semi-final, it's a shot to nothing, all the pressure's on Leinster.
Yeah.
There's nothing that says you can't give them a hell of a game. But I just worry that you're just going to struggle to contain that power.
Yeah.
And if you look at in certain areas, there's still a gap in quality. I mean, if Hendy's going to be injured, you start thinking, are you going to be able to, Furbank, you need to be right back fit and firing by then.
Yeah, hopefully his arm's okay.
Yeah, and then you look at the centres. Dingwall and Odendahl are good players. I like both those players. But then you compare it to Barrett and Ringrose, and you think, with Henshaw coming off the bench,
yeah,
you start thinking that doesn't feel like a fair fight. And then front rows. You got a very good front row for the way that you play. But I wouldn't fancy your chances at scrum time. And if you start giving away penalties there, and you start letting them get the field, get into a maul game, you start thinking, I can see a blueprint for Leinster picking you apart quite quickly.
Yeah, would I be surprised if I saw Leinster go 6-2 or 7-1 on the bench? I wouldn't be surprised, because I think they'll recognise that as an area they can exploit, and they'll try and keep the game as tight as possible to stop Northampton getting the ball out to the backs, who I think are our strength by a long way. But I'm still backing the boys in black, green and gold. We're going to go to Dublin and we're going to steal a win. So, yeah, take that, Rory.
Well, how can I deny that kind of confidence?
Exactly. But, yeah, overall, I was really happy with Saints' performance. Castres, I think they had moments where they looked dangerous. They stuck in there through that first half. Although they were probably second best, they stayed close. And then Saints pulled away in the second half. I think their discipline let them down a little bit. Again, maybe the refereeing, not necessarily the best, but ultimately a solid victory for England's best club side in this competition. Yeah, little caveat there. Moving on, quarterfinal number 4, the Battle of the Red and Black, Toulouse versus Toulon.
Wasn't it nice to see a game that was close?
Who'd have thunk it? Who'd have thunk it in Europe's elite competition that there could be a close game?
And down to the wire is an understatement for this one. Hugely physical. I mean, so the weather played a massive part in this one, right? That which is broadly why it was close. It was one of those days where it was just so hard to keep hold of the ball. Toulouse knocked it on over the line twice where they should have scored it. So maybe you could argue this was closer than it could have been had Toulouse taken their opportunities. But
arguably, it was still close at half-time, and the first half, I'd say, was less weather impacted.
Yeah.
So
yes. And, we've recognised I think this is a really good Toulon side. I mean, they're third in the top 14 for a reason.
Yeah.
It's a good side. And this was a hell of a physical battle. Just lovely to watch. Yeah. Two big French sides go at it hammer and tong, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, hark back to the last game. What I'd give for Northampton to have Dave Ribbons back.
Well, yes. Dave Ribbons and Lewis Ludlam, who there's no great surprise that they're thriving in France.
Oh, they are so good. Everywhere, physical, confrontational. They don't back down. They don't care if Manny Miafu's running at you head on. They don't care if Cyril Bay is running straight at you. They don't care. They will stand their ground. They will fight with every single inch of their being. And it's no wonder Toulon have kind of embraced them as one of their own already.
Yeah, they've absolutely fit right in down there, haven't they?
Yeah.
And the fact that Dave Robbins is the skipper
says everything.
A hell of an achievement, really. It says a lot. No, I thought this was a much more interesting game than a lot of the games I've watched recently in the European Cup because of that physical nature of it. The Toulon defence was because actually, Toulouse still, which I guess isn't necessarily surprising, but Toulouse had most of the possession and they played most of the rugby. But Toulon's D was just relentless throughout the whole match, really.
Yeah.
I mean, Miafu actually made a couple of breaks, almost got a clean set of heels a couple of times, which was interesting to see. It's the hippo on the loose.
It's like that scene of the Statue of Liberty running in the Ghostbusters movie, isn't it?
Yeah, it was ungainly, I think would be kind. But the only point where this game really changed was when Baptiste Serran got yellowed. And then I think Toulouse scored both their tries whilst he was in the bin.
Yeah.
And actually,
third best scrum half in the world.
I mean, you could easily make that argument because he's bloody good, isn't he?
He is.
This was just entertaining. This was really entertaining to see two teams go at it and just have that real fierce competitive nature to it.
Yeah, and I thought the battle between Ramos Jaminet was interesting. Battle of the boots.
Yeah, a couple of dead-eye boots, and actually Ramos arguably blinked first until he slotted the all-important one at the end.
It's the one that counts.
It's the one that counts. I mean, just fascinating matchups all over the pitch. Really, I mean, the packs are ludicrous, but I mean, Ruma 8 for Toulouse.
Monstrous.
Looks phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. Jacques Willis is.
So I thought he had in the first half he had a period, about a 10-minute window where just nothing went right for him. But boy, did he react to that and respond to that. You could see the look on his face when he got pulled off to be the sub to bring on the prop to cover Cyril Bay. He was like, no.
I wouldn't want to be on his bad side.
But he showed his class. So one thing I do want to talk about, Paul Grau, the 9, obviously he's not Anton Dupont.
No.
Is the impact of one player being out of that team that much of a leveller to make Toulouse much more beatable this year? Have they lost that edge, that unpredictability?
Well, I think that's it, isn't it? Dupont brings the unpredictable nature to your attack because you never quite know whether he's bouncing left, bouncing right, going to make a break, going to run out the guts himself. What is Dupont going to do is the big question when you're playing against Toulouse or France. Grau's a tidy 9. He ticks a team over, but you're then relying on the other players to create that unpredictability. And actually, it's not really what they do. What they're all very good at, and the way Toulouse set themselves up, is they're brilliant at reacting and running off Dupont whatever direction he goes in, which is why they're such a slick outfit. They look a lot more predictable in attack.
Yeah.
And a lot more defendable. Now, that being said, you still have to stop the predictable nature of Cyril Bay, Julien Marchand, Thibaut Flahon, Miafu, Cross, Willis, Ruma, Kinghorn, Aki, Barassi, Malia, Ramos, Entomac.
Yeah, that pack alone is daunting. I think that's a scary pack, and then you throw in the backs as well. You'd like to think that.
Let me throw a few names off the bench for you. Malvaca, Gelange. It's a very relentless nature of playing Toulouse.
Yeah,
but they are probably more predictable in how you defend them now. So if you can front up, they're probably more stoppable than they would otherwise be.
So is there a chink in their armour?
It's probably less a chink in the armour and more they've just lost one of their biggest weapons, but they've got loads of really big weapons.
Yeah, sometimes you forget about them.
The one they've lost is, the most spectacular and the one they use a lot.
Yeah.
But, the rest of the war chest isn't exactly bare.
No, I think that's fair to say. That is very fair to say. Well, I do think this all points towards it, again. Maybe I'm just being a bit, presumptuous here, but it just feels like the stars are aligning for a particular team that we've spoken about. With Toulouse having this one less weapon, the
money's on Leinster, isn't it?
The money's on Leinster. Do Toulouse beat Bordeaux in the next semi-final?
Yes, I think they do. I mean, I really like that Bordeaux side. I like watching them. But I think the frailties up front are going to do for them against Toulouse.
Yeah, okay. Because I just think Luku versus Grau, I see only one player winning that head-to-head.
Yeah, I agree. But if you just match them, the pack, man for man, best one in the world, that is the thing that... And look, Bordeaux beat Toulouse recently in top 14. It's not that they can't beat Toulouse, but you throw in, it's the European semi-final. You throw in, it's not going to be at Bordeaux. It's going to be, I imagine they'll have it at Lyon, would be my guess.
Yeah, I can't remember where it's being held at the moment.
And Toulouse have got the pedigree, they've got the experience. It would require Bordeaux to play their absolute best game for 80 minutes.
Okay.
And from what I've seen of them, I'm not convinced they can do it.
I don't think I've seen a full 80 minutes from Bordeaux this tournament.
No.
And they've had some really impressive scores, but I think even in the games where, Penno's scoring 6 tries, I still feel there's a 15-20 minute window where they're not quite there. Yeah. You can't afford to do that to Toulouse.
No, they switch off for 15-20 minutes, and against lesser sides, they can wear it. I don't think you can wear it against Toulouse. You certainly can't wear it against Leinster.
No. Yes. So it makes for an interesting semi-final draw. So the semi-finals are going to be Leinster versus Northampton, the last bastion of hope for English rugby, and Toulouse versus Bordeaux. So if you were to put your money on the semi-finals and the likely final, I think I know what your answer is going to be. But what do you think it's going to be?
I suspect Leinster will win by, and I'm sorry, I think they'll win by 20.
Will Northampton get a point on the board?
Yes.
Okay, good. So
I would put something in the region of 35-15. That'd be my guess. I think it'll be a valiant effort, but I think Leinster will pull away in the end. And I believe. Do you know what? On this occasion, I hope I'm wrong. I'm going to back Saints on this occasion.
I'll take that.
Yeah, I marginally like Saints more than Leinster.
That says a lot about that says a lot about how much you don't like Leinster.
Yeah. I think it's pretty fair to say I marginally dislike Leinster more than Saints.
Yeah, I think that's the correct phraseology. I think, yeah.
And then the other semi-final, I am going to back Toulouse to win that. I think that'll be reasonably tight. I think it'll be less than 10 points in that one. So it could even go down to the wire, much like this one as well.
So sadly, as predicted at the very start of this tournament, it's going to be a Leinster-Toulouse final.
It is, yeah.
So we could have saved ourselves a whole lot of hassle and just set them up as a friendly. And
let's just give everyone a day off and just go with that.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to back Northampton. I'm going to back Northampton to beat Leinster, and I'm going to back Bordeaux to beat Toulouse. How about that?
You're so contrary. So
contrary. But it's only because Bordeaux are my favourite top 14 team, Northampton my favourite Premiership team. Got to back your favourites. If you don't, what am I doing?
You're a man of conviction.
I'm a man of conviction. But that's the Champions Cup, Rory. Let's move on. Let's talk the Women's Six Nations, which stormed back into focus this weekend with some fantastic games, some fantastic performances. What were your overall thoughts of watching the Women's Six Nations this weekend? How did you feel the games went?
Well, I would say that my overriding thought is that the gap between the teams is closing really fast. If you took the results at face value on the Saturday, you would think that France and England had a couple of easy games. Actually, if you watch those games, it was far from the truth. Ireland pushed England really deep into that game.
It was 5-7 at half time.
5-7 at half time. Really, it was only until the benches came into play that England were able to pull away. You could see the gulf between the two. Ireland were great for a large reason. They were absolute dynamos at the breakdown, and their defence was phenomenal. And England will actually, I think, come away from that game pretty pleased at how good a testing they got.
Yeah,
because that was far from a procession.
They would have learnt a lot from that game. And also flipping back to France versus Wales, there was only 9 points in that at half-time as well. So it feels like with those two, it's more a tale of the benches just having that bit of extra quality to see things over the line, more so than there being a vast gap between the two sides. It was just a tale of the benches having a bit too much.
That's exactly it. So you're basically, what you're seeing in those two games is what the more developed professional setup does in terms of strength and depth. Actually, first 15 versus first 15 wasn't a huge amount between those teams. All right, maybe England rotated a little bit, but it was still a strong outfit. As far as I can tell, the French went pretty full ball.
Yeah, the French team looked pretty strong. Yeah, I'd argue the English team was pretty strong as well. I wouldn't say it was a weak team by
the rotation, but a really strong England team. Yeah. And actually, I mean, the big changing points were when they changed the front row. So Clifford and Byrne, and Bottoman and Maudmuir were good, but Clifford and Byrne were just that bit more dynamic when they came on, I think, and created a bit more of a physical problem for Ireland up the guts.
Yeah, Sarah Byrne, great cameo off the bench. You could say.
They actually both scored really good tries.
Yeah.
You know, both players scored really good, really athletic tries actually as well. And is it Lucy Packer, the 9?
Yeah.
Who I'm not sure which club side she's actually off the top of my
head. I believe she's at Harlequins, I believe.
Yeah. So Mo Hunt started, and you know we're big fans of Mo Hunt. She's one of the best women's players I've ever seen. But Packer came on, and she massively upped the pace of the game, and that was a big change for England because they probably went to a more pragmatic game plan overall. But once she came on and sped that up, suddenly that kind of relentless forward pressure, really put Ireland on the back foot. So I thought she was really impressive, and actually having 2 9s that you can play in those different ways puts them in quite good stead, I think. Because
it's a real test of options for John Mitchell, I'd say.
Yeah,
which change it up.
Yeah, you know, you can tell that Mitchell is really keen to build a squad. And actually, one of the potential strengths of the Women's Six Nations as it is, from a squad building perspective, is because it's not got quite that do or die nature that the Men's Six Nations does, where you really can't afford to take your foot off it. If you're England, you've actually got a bit more freedom to rotate and change things around and build a squad towards the World Cup, as opposed to
run up.
I think one of the issues actually that Northern Hemisphere sides have in the men's game, it's very difficult to build a wider squad because there's so much riding on doing well in the Six Nations.
Each fixture's a test match. You can't afford to rotate 4 or 5 to give them a chance because you need to win them all.
Exactly. Whereas I think some of Southern Hemisphere sides, particularly South Africa, do much better at blooding new players in and building their strength and depth. And actually, I think John Mitchell's taken that approach with this England squad, and he's building a World Cup winning squad. Hopefully.
I'm also hopeful. I think you're right. But I also think we'll be doing a huge disservice if bit of a surprise result, I'd say, based off of our prediction last week.
Yeah.
Italy versus
Scotland. I didn't
Scotland.
see this coming. I didn't see this one coming, I have to say. We thought that Italy could push Scotland. Scotland would be very disappointed with this one. And actually, fair play to Italy. That you've seen it in kind of flashes in the first few games, that there is a good team in there that hasn't quite gelled, or hasn't quite put together a performance. You know, pushed England pretty close for parts of that first game. Really disappointing in the next match against Ireland, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think.
But yeah, I mean, but you've seen flashes, and they've got some really good players in there. You know, I talked about Stefan at 9, who I think is a really, really good player. Musso, the winger, scored a couple in this one. She's very good.
Yeah.
But yeah, they really turned it on Sunday, and actually were well worth the win. And I think Scotland will.
Think they took their eye off the ball a bit, or is that discrediting Italy too much?
It's possibly just I don't like to cast aspersions where I don't need to, but I think maybe this is one where Scotland will come away from it and think, were we in the right place mentally for this one?
Yeah, it does seem that way. It definitely feels like they missed opportunity there to build on something. I was feeling relatively positive around Scotland's performances in this tournament.
Yeah,
I think this has put a bit of a dampener on it. We were building up, kind of saying, England v France was first versus second. Scotland and Ireland were third versus fourth, and Wales and Italy fifth versus sixth. So it's completely mixed up, that narrative now, which is no bad thing.
No, it gives an opportunity for the standings to be quite interesting come the end of the tournament, and that's always great.
It does.
But from a Scotland perspective, that doesn't help them right now, and they'll be pretty disappointed with it.
Yes, they will. I'm just going to get the table up just to see, because I think this brings into perspective so Wales are sat bottom of this table now as well.
Yeah.
I think round 5 has become a little bit spicier for the wooden spoon, because that's Italy versus Wales in the final fixture. Wales will be desperate.
And let's not get too far ahead of it as well, because Wales are at home against Ireland on Sunday, and I think they'll target that as a very winnable game for them.
True. So yeah, that'll be interesting. It's interesting that the table as it stands now, after 3 rounds, it's England and France 15, 14 points ahead, and then Ireland in third are only on 5 points. There's a 9-point gap already after 3 rounds of rugby. I think that shows, and I think that's the story I'm going to tell here. England and France, yes, they are the 2 best teams in this competition. But Ireland, Italy, Scotland and Wales, it's no longer 3rd v 4th and 5th v 6th. It's 4 nations, similar levels.
Yeah, and that's the challenge to those 4 nations, right? Is who
rises.
The gap, because the thing that's going to close the gap is who can get a professional setup together in the best way possible, as quickly as possible. And it's actually not obvious to suggest who that might be, because Ireland, they were talking about it in the commentary, they've got the Celtic Cup or something like that, where there's a number of Irish sides playing in that, but it's not a professional league. Obviously, a lot of the Welsh players, a few of the Italians, a few of the Scots, and a few of the Irish are all playing in the WSL, not WSL, the
PWR.
PWR. But then you do lose that continuity, because you're still trying to bring players together. As we've talked about, bringing lots of players together from lots of different clubs is not an easy task, and you don't get as much time to have these sort of camps as you do in, say, the men's game.
Yeah.
So who's got the capacity to build that professional setup quickly enough to compete with other teams?
I suppose that's the gauntlet laid down to these other unions. If you want to catch up with the Red Roses and French women, you need to throw some money at to close that gap. That is what's stopping that gap being closed at the moment. I think it is the access to the facilities, the access to the world-class coaches. I think that's what it hinges on. And for instance, Wales, bringing Sean Lynn in, that's a positive move.
Massively positive move. But the thing that it's the aspect of it that I think is really important, that it's difficult to comprehend when you spend your time watching a lot of the men's rugby, but having your players be full-time professionals and not have other jobs to go into, being able to spend their time focusing on their own game, their own skills, and also not having loads of other worries about the rest of their career. Actually, that's such a massive aspect to it, because can you imagine having to fit your training around your 9 to 5 and maybe a family life as well?
Yeah.
And, and then people have the gall to criticise you because...
Yeah, people like...
Yeah, that wasn't a very good kick. Well, maybe she should have spent more time practicing it if she wasn't also a doctor.
Yeah, it does put it all into perspective. It makes it even more impressive, the qualities and levels of rugby we're seeing on the pitch in this tournament. You put that backdrop on that, a lot of these players you're watching have day jobs outside of rugby is baffling. One thing I want to mention as well, for next week, Rory, in the backdrop of things going on, there's been an under-18s tournament going on in the Six Nations. I'm going to come in next week with a bit of an update, because, spoiler alert, Welsh fans, if you're listening, there is good news coming your way.
More green shoots.
More green shoots. But because of time restrictions, Rory, we won't dig into that this week, but maybe next week I'll do a little summary for us on the under-18s international game that's going on at the moment. Some nice, exciting little tournament going on in that world. But we move on now to the DPRFR. It's our time for our weekly address from El Presidente. We got a little taste for what this might be about, but let's not presume. Let's allow El Presidente to make his address to the nation. Everyone stand.
Well, week on week, we've been building out the culture and the history of the DPRFR. One of the main things needed in a culture is a villain. You know, there's in much of Judeo-Christian tradition, there is the devil, famously.
Famously, I've heard of that one.
Right up there with the other villains. He's right up there with like Doctor Doom,
Donald Trump.
you know, Venom, Donald Trump, all that kind of stuff. You know, the devil's right up there. Well, in the DPRFR, we have our own villain for whom that we put on the annual pantomime and pay tribute to for his theatrics in primarily antagonising the Irish. And that's big bad Ben Tamifuna.
If there's not something we like to see more than someone antagonising the Irish, I don't know what there is.
Oh my God, I loved it. Now, Ben Tamifuna has for a long time been one of my favourite players because for those of us who are on the larger side, he really gives new hope into what is possible to be as
a bastion of hope.
professional
A bastion of hope for the larger chap.
Absolutely. Actually, annoyingly, looks like he's slimmed down a little bit now, but you know,
Yeah,
he's still
mixed messages there, Ben. Come on now.
Yeah, but I would still say a large man. Well, on Saturday, he took a graze to the head,
Yeah.
I think it would be fair to say, and went down clutching his face like he'd been clubbed to death.
Yeah, vicious attack.
An absolute vicious attack. As it turned out, there wasn't much in it, and no penalty was given. And on his walk back to the halfway line, the Munster fans, who always travel in numbers and are vociferous in their support of their team, were giving it large to old Ben.
Now, we don't condone some of the hand gestures and the language here on the podcast.
Can I just contrast that? I 100% condone and I encourage more 50, 60-year-old fans to stand up from their seats in the stands and give it the old wanker sign.
Well, it's always an interesting one. It is funny because we all know that they wouldn't do it to their face in the street. They wouldn't dream of doing it to their face in the street.
It really made me laugh to see the old fella rising from his chair and giving Ben Tamifuna the wanker sign whilst Ben cups his ear to the crowd to take in all the booze.
Yeah.
Great bit of fun. Love a bit of pantomime villainy.
As we said, we love a bit of drama. We love a bit of a talking point. We love a bit of, bit of controversy here, there, and everywhere.
Bit of character.
So, for Ben Tamifuna to be inducted into the DPR folklore as the villain, the pantomime villain of the annual DPRFR gala, I think it's very fitting. I think he would fit the role well, as we've seen.
Yeah.
His acting skills are right up there. We saw he made that graze look like it was, something worse than it was. So, yeah, absolutely. I fully endorse this as the administrator of the DPRFR. I'm very glad that the El Presidente has highlighted this for this week's State of Address to the Nation. And with that, DPRFR gets packed away into its nice little throne that the DPR El Presidente sits on, waiting for the next segment to be spoken about next week. And with that, we move on to Q&A, Rory. So I've got one question that I've had off of the internet. I don't know if you've heard of it. I've also got another question that I had recently on one of my TikTok lives that I thought I'd put to you. It's really been one I've been mulling over. I'll start on the one I got off of the internet. Not sure if you've heard of it. From Gaza. So in the Saints versus Castres game, there were 2 incidents of head-on-head collisions where neither were awarded a yellow card, and many were kind of downgraded to just penalties or kind of not much looked into it. Have the rules around high tackles changed after this kind of drive to rule them out, or are refs just interpreting them differently these days?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'd hate to cast aspersions on referees. Actually, that's not true. I love casting aspersions on referees. I think this was a poor refereeing performance generally. What I will say is there was definitely a trend across the weekend of really speeding the game along as much as possible. Luke Pearce, who was refereeing the Leinster game, was really speeding the game along.
Yeah,
and he wasn't.
He's really good at that, to be fair.
Yeah, he had no truck for any kind of intervention from the skippers to review anything or slow anything down. He was just moving everything along, making decisions, and more or less getting them all right. But he wasn't slowing things down for the TMO every opportunity. I think in the Saints game, it was a slightly weaker refereeing performance. You do get these kind of changes in interpretations depending on where the referee is from. I think, was it the Italian referee in that game?
Yeah.
Yeah. who generally speaking, I think is pretty good, but wasn't his best performance. Just some unusual interpretations of the law, I thought. You know, the Kemeny one, to not give a penalty try because it's not in the act of scoring. Well, I mean, he's 6'6", and all he had to do was fall over the line to score it.
Well, considering the high tackle was downgraded in danger because the player had dropped in height, was because he was dropping his height to put the ball over the line. If that's not the act of scoring, I don't know what is.
Yeah, it wasn't a great performance from his point of view. So, yeah, one of the annoying things in rugby is that the variety of refereeing interpretations often does go along country lines or competition lines. This is one of those moments. I think it was just a bad performance from that referee on this occasion. Nothing more sinister than that. I do slightly get the impression that I think there's a little bit more sympathy being shown for tacklers in certain situations where maybe the technique isn't perfect, but the actual level of the collision isn't quite as bad as maybe it looks in slow-mo. So there's possibly a case where there's a slight directive on showing a bit more sympathy to the tackler, but I don't think there's a huge change from where they've been previously.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. I don't think there's been a huge shift in approach. I think that was a particularly bad performance from a referee on a couple of occasions. I'm not saying bad performance overall, I'm just saying there was a couple of really questionable calls.
I'm fairly sure I've seen the player. I forget who it was who tackled Kemeny, but I believe he's been cited.
He has been cited. It was Remy Baget. It'd be interesting how that's applied, because obviously he picked up another yellow card later in the game for another bit of reckless behaviour. So whether that plays a factor in fighting, I don't know. Yeah, but it'll be interesting to see how things move on. Often with referees, you see that at the start of a season, they're really hot on stuff, and then they almost apply things with absolutely no degree of sympathy and no degree of flexibility. Maybe there's been some feedback loops with the players understanding how it's working, how there's dynamic and active situations. I've heard the term rugby incident far more recently than I did at the start of the season.
Yeah.
And perhaps that's probably the right way it should be going. It's always going to bring with it, though, this grey area that people like us will absolutely dine out on, but creates a very uncomfortable position for players and, home fans on the wrong side of things.
Yeah, well, podcasts live in the grey.
We do.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got a second question for you, Rory. And this was posted to me on the TikTok Live, and I thought, what a great question, because I really struggled to answer it. You're picking the England team. No factors involved limiting your selection. However, you're only allowed one set of brothers in the England squad. Do you pick the Curry brothers or the Willis brothers?
I mean, it's a hell of a criteria. I would question the person who put that stipulation in place, but okay. God, that's a hell of a question.
Yeah. See why I struggled?
Very dependent on how you're going to play. If you're purely attacking the breakdown, a la, say, England against Ireland, probably picking the Curries.
Not the first time Rory said that in his life.
No. Curry, that would be nice. Yeah, I would pick... Probably I'd pick the Curries on the basis of them. That's a tough one, though. If I was playing a possession game with lots of running up the guts, I'd pick the Willises because they are bigger and more physical ball carriers. But if I thought I was playing a bit of an all-court speed game, needed to slow down the breakdown, particularly if I was playing against a team that played like that, I'd probably want the Curries on the pitch. I mean, you saw how disruptive the Curries were against Toulouse last week. They made life quite difficult, and they were very effective in attack as well. How fortunate we are to have both those sets of brothers. So we can only pick 3 of the 4. But...
Yeah. Well, if you can't answer, Rory, I'm happy.
It's difficult.
I'm happy to open this one up to the listener. Let us know who you would pick if you had to, and you're picking the England side, and you could only pick one set of brothers. Would you pick the Curries, or would you pick the Willis brothers? Let us know who you'd pick and why. Because it's a humdinger.
Yeah, it's humdinger. I would think if I was absolutely limited by that, I would pick the Willises because you get more variety in the brothers, obviously with them not being twins. and you can probably account for the breakdown work with, say, a Pollock or an Earl or a Guy Pepper or someone. So I could probably accommodate not having a Curry in there, but I'm not happy about it.
So that's where I landed as well, because I said, well, in that scenario, I can still pick Tom Curry or Ben Curry, and they can play 6, Willis 7, Willis 8. And they offer.
Sorry, I was assuming I could only have one set of brothers, and I can't have any from the other set.
Oh yeah, well, let's go with that because that makes it a more drastic question. But I also went on the Willises just because they're two very different players, where the Currys are almost like, well, they literally are a carbon copy of each other. So yeah, that's where I landed. But what a fun little question! Great question. And sadly, that is all we have time for this week. So before I run the jingle for the 15th time at the end of an episode of our podcast, any final words, Rory?
Sam Ifuna is a wanker, is a wanker. Sam Ifuna is a wanker, is a wanker.
Apologise for the foul language. Right, okay. That's episode 15 in the bag this week. We have had a blast. I just hope you come back and join us next week. We've been Ruxballs and Oval Balls, and we will be back.